It's a tall order tonight for Arsenal, but they've got to go out there and overturn a first leg 1-0 deficit against Porto, who really, Simon, are in the habit of winning at the moment. They did a job in Benfica recently, 5-0. They beat them in the Portuguese Primeira Liga.
They're going to get beat.
And then at the weekend there, Porto went to Portimonense and won by 3-0. So Porto come calling tonight. Who's going to get beat, Arsenal or Porto?
Porto are going to get beat.
Right. What makes you so
beat
convinced?
Because Arsenal are a good side.
Yeah.
And they're in decent nick. And, you know, the result in Portugal is incidental. The Arsenal at the Emirates will beat Porto and will go through. No doubt in my mind.
I hope you're right. I mean, it's not so incidental in as much as Porto coming here 1-up.
So what? It's half-time. You wouldn't think a game was lost at half-time, would you? You would think that likely what would happen is that Arsenal would get themselves together and overcome the adversity in the second half. And they've got the ability to do it. They're in the form to do it. And I expect them fully to do it. And I don't think Porto are going to be able to stand up to Arsenal, certainly in the form that Arsenal are in. Okay, they can look at the way they played in the first game and they can look at the challenges they couldn't overcome. But in the second game, they will have now looked at Porto, worked out what it was that Porto did so effectively to deny Arsenal the opportunities that they would have been historically creating, have recently been creating in every single game. And I'm pretty confident that Arsenal, the atmosphere, the motivation of the players, and the general feeling of well-being about Arsenal will bring out a significant victory tonight and move them on into the next round of the Champions League.
Well, certainly Porto know what they're getting in Arsenal, because this is a side under Mikel Arteta, who's been in charge of the club for 4.5 years. In his first 4 seasons, Arsenal have finished 8th, 5th, 2nd, and they won an FA Cup in that time. Funnily enough, it was about 3 years ago, Arteta gave us his thoughts on what might happen in future months and years.
Created a really strong group, a really strong bond with our players, with our fans, with our staff, and that's going to pay some big tributes, I think, in the future when everything comes to normality and we are able to work the way it's needed to work with some stability. I think this project is going to go bang.
Wow. Well, it has gone bang, but it could be a louder bang if they win the Champions League. Do you remember him saying that?
I remember him. I mean, he talks in these terms repeatedly, doesn't he? He talks about the spirit of the group and the togetherness and the collectiveness. That was done during COVID, so it would have been relatively specific to the times.
I think you were calling it all theory at the time.
I think he went for a period of being all theory, and I worried that he was all theory. And after the FA Cup final win, I felt that there was a period of time where he was morphing from somebody that I thought had the chops to deliver an outcome into someone that was a theorist. I think he's moved back into the territory of being someone that can deliver outcomes, yet he hasn't won anything. So we have to judge him by the standards that I think he would set himself. I would ask Arteta, if we were sitting in front of us, is it your intention to win something, i.e. the Premier League? And his answer would probably be yes. Then I judge him by those standards.
Absolutely.
And he's yet to do that.
Well, he's won an FA Cup. I know
no,
that.
I'm talking about the Premier League.
Yeah.
And the FA Cup is a great competition to win, but that's 3 years ago now, and you judge people by what they're doing in the here and now, what they've done in the past. It'll be interesting to see, because a lot has changed at that football club, because there was a time where Stan Kroenke's involvement in that football club, he was the most passive billionaire in terms of mediocrity, seemed to be something he was quite comfortable with. And that's changed, and it changed post the European Super League. Whether that's because his son got more involved at front of house stuff and felt that some of the observations that I made at the time were that there was more focus on the Clippers and the Colorado Rapids than there was on Arsenal.
Yeah.
And post the European Super League, there was a sea change, a pivot from what they were prepared to spend to the manner in which the club was operating, and hence the reasons why their recruitment is better, their team's performance is better, and they look like they're on a trajectory, which means that they will win something. And if it wasn't for the fact they've got 2 very elite football clubs slightly in front of them, they would have already won something.
Yeah. I mean, 5 years ago, you called them a dynasty in decline.
They were.
And as you say, all of a sudden, I mean, was Arteta Kroenke sliding doors moment?
No. I think the European Super League was a sliding doors moment. I think the pivot off the back of the vilification that those clubs got, and then the subsequent, poking above the head above the parapet of people like Stefan Eck from Spotify that said they'll buy the club for £2 billion, and the change of direction post that, I think, kicked Kroenke, or certainly his son, into order. I think Arteta they alighted upon a manager. They made a decision. Unai Emery has gone the other way. He's gone to Aston Villa, doing wonderful things at Villa. Okay, they got beat on the weekend by Spurs, but Villa have done remarkable things under him.
It's funny though, I remember years ago being at Goodison on the day that Ancelotti began his managerial career at
Yeah.
Everton, on the day that Arteta began his managerial career at Arsenal. And it was Everton against Arsenal. And much of the talk that day was that Everton have got the better deal here, getting Carlo.
I never thought that. I never thought there was one single scintilla of that decision that made any sense. He was never going to stay at Everton. He only came to Everton, but they only came to Everton because they were prepared to think, I pay more money than Arsenal were prepared to pay him. And he stayed for a year, brought his son along with him, and recruited players that have been of little benefit to Everton, have cost Everton money, and disappeared at the first opportunity to a football club that was bigger.
But
so he had no commitment to coming to Everton.
Though, you could be excused to think it would be a better fit the other way around.
Well, of
Carlo,
course. Well, of course,
with
because
Arsenal,
Carlo Ancelotti was a
Mikel
Champions
at
League. Well, Carlo Ancelotti was a Champions League winning manager
Yeah.
that had managed some of the biggest clubs in Europe. So on paper, you look at it and say clearly that was, but it was the wrong fit.
Yeah.
If Carlo Ancelotti had gone to Manchester United,
Yeah.
he would still probably be there if he'd been successful. I.e., he wouldn't have been departing after the first season by his own choice because he skipped out of the door because Real Madrid came calling.
I so wanted Brighton to do a job in Roma, and I think that's beyond them because of the first leg result, 4-0 in Roma's favour, of course. I really wanted Brighton to put Roma out. But it's a close second, this. I would love Arsenal to do a job in Porto tonight and get to a final. I remember being in Paris.
Why?
When Arsenal took on Barcelona that night. When Arsenal went ahead that night, Sol Campbell put them ahead with the header, and Barcelona came back into it in no small way thanks to Henrik Larsson. But I remember the disappointment on the Arsenal fans' faces at the end of it because they were so close. It would be phenomenal for Arteta and Arsenal.
Yeah, absolutely.
If they could find a way to get to this final and win the Champions League.
Of course it would be phenomenal. I don't care if they do or don't because I'm not an Arsenal fan.
That's nice.
But I don't. Neither do you. You're a Rangers fan. So with that in
I'm
mind,
not a particular Rangers fan. I very much like Arsenal to win it. Very much like Arsenal to win it.
if you're asking me to choose between Arsenal and Porto, I'm going to choose Arsenal. But if you're asking me to be fully invested in a club that I don't support and wishing them that it would be phenomenal for them, I couldn't care less if they win the Champions League or not. As long as they're beating opposition, that doesn't diminish the English.
Did you try and mimic me there saying phenomenal?
Phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I hope
you wanted all things English.
I do. In an ideal world, I want the best teams to win the tournament. I want merit to be at the centre of it, and ideally, I'd like that to be from the English Premier League. But if the best team wins the tournament, they win it. But I would think that if Arsenal can get past Porto, they give themselves an opportunity. But I'm not sitting there rooting for them.
Would it not be quite incredible if Arteta and Arsenal can find a way of winning the Champions League in his first job, senior job in management?
It would be phenomenal. It would be miraculous. It would be beyond comprehension. It would be one of the greatest things I think I've ever seen. I don't think I'd ever recover from it. I think I'd spend my entire time celebrating the summer alongside my friends that are Arsenal fans. I would phone David Dean on a regular basis and say people have achieved things that you never did when you were the chairman of the football club. I would spend every day of my life wanting to be on Arsenal Fan TV to join the party.
I get it.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.